Okay, it is a huge honor today to be interviewing James McAnally, who I guess we grew up down the street from each other. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and I'm Irish. And McAnally, any Mick has to be Irish. And you grew up were you born and raised in Oklahoma, or just go to dental school there?
Born and raised.
Born and raised, where in Oklahoma?
A little place called Salisaw, right on the border of Arkansas and Oklahoma, eastern side of the state.
I always thought it's funny because my mom's brother, Mark, he moved down there with a son and 7 daughters, big Irish Catholic family. And the baby 2 girls who moved from Kansas to Oklahoma, oh my God, we were there the following Christmas, and the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old talked just like she was born and raised in Oklahoma. But the ones who were, I think, like 7 and older, kept their Kansas accent. So, so how are you doing? Thank you for joining me today.
You know what, Howard? My father and grandfather were both dentists in that area. My grandfather in what was Indian Territory before Oklahoma was even a state. In his day, the only rule was you had to take your firearm off before you came into the office.
That was your grandfather?
Yeah, that's only been just over 100 years ago. Isn't that crazy?
Wow, that is amazing. 100. Yeah, I was born in 1962, which was 100 years after the end of the Civil War, which was 1862. And so yeah, it's times are
that long ago,
Yeah.
Where we've been.
So your dad and your grandfather were both dentists.
Absolutely.
It's kind of interesting because when you go into dental school, it always seems by show of hands that about a third of the class, I say, raise your hand if there's another dentist in your family, your dad, your mom, your uncle, your cousin, and about a third of the hands go up. And of course, when you go around the world, I think it's very interesting to note that most families, probably 6 billion out of the 7 billion earthlings, are a nuclear family where the whole family lives in one house, mom, dad, grandpas, brothers, everybody. And number 2, you're born into your occupation. I mean, if you're born in Tanzania and your dad's a goat herder,
guess what?
That's what you are. So how young were you when you knew you wanted to be a dentist like your dad and your grandpa?
I can remember conversations, especially with one of my grandmothers, who was the big cheerleader for dentistry, really, in our family.
Your grandmother?
Yeah, who, of course, my grandfather's wife. And she was literally saying it when I was 10 years old, I would wind up being a dentist.
Wow. Yeah. Well, my mom was saying since I was could walk that I'd be the first American Pope.
Well,
she did. She took us to mass every single day, that poor lady. She always told me I'd be the first American Pope, that all the popes were Italians, and I'd be the first American Pope. But it worked on my 2 sisters. They left high school, went straight to the Catholic nunnery. I was going to be the first American Pope until I met a little blonde girl named Jane when I was 16, and she just trashed those plans. So
you're the Pope of Dental Town.
What's that?
You are the Pope of Dental Town.
And you know what? The only Pope that I created was I always think in my head Pope Poo P-O-O do D-O-O Pope Poodoo, and those are the first letters of the 9 specialties recognized by the American Dental Association. So if you take P-O-P-E P-O-O-D-O-O. And the reason I do that is because, having a monthly magazine, I'm always telling the staff, Pope Poodoo, meaning, don't go 3 months without an article in endo or perio or prosthodont. You got it. 7 of them are clinical and 2 of them are didactic, oral radiology and public health. But hey, I first met you and heard about you on the scene is you're huge into this big case marketing. Tell us how that came along and how you got interested in that and also how you went from Oklahoma to Miami.
Well, in a roundabout way, Howard, I wound up going to a general practice residency at the University of Washington, which was very heavy surgical based and anesthesia based. And after that program, I bought a practice in the Northwest in Seattle. And went through several different transformations of what was just sort of a family practice into a big insurance-based general practice, and then transforming it again into a restorative and implant-based practice over a number of years. And really what I learned in that journey was to do those larger cases, you have to have some pretty specialized marketing and you have to be very focused on how you sell those cases. So over many years of trial and error, I kind of came up with my own solutions to those things, and then ultimately started selling those to other dentists in the profession as far as teaching them how to do the cases non-clinically, of course. There's plenty of people that can teach you how to do these cases clinically, but almost no one that can get you there from the non-clinical side for the marketing and selling. And then ultimately, I teamed up in my current consulting business with Dr. Larry Brooks, who's up in the Boston area. And I eventually moved to the East Coast just to be in the same time zone as our back office, basically. So that, from the start of dental school to now, it's been, 22 years? So interesting ride. And, now obviously dentistry is looking to me for solutions for what I'm doing now. So.
And so tell them what is big case marketing? I mean, is that more of a direct mail? Is that more case presentation? Is that social media? Is that all the above?
It can be a little bit of all of the above, Howard, but the reality is that when we say marketing in dentistry, it should always be attached to another word, sales. And the reality is most practices have no focus on really how they sell the service. They do a lot of marketing, but they really don't have much structure in place for selling, especially outside of the insurance system. Most patients show up in these insurance-based practices, and the only selling that is done is, well, does my insurance pay for this? If we're going to go into the category where patients are writing us checks for $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, $100,000, which can happen for the most broken down patients, there's got to be a sales process for that to occur. So that's really where we start all of our trainings, and that is, let's hand you a real sales process to use with these cases, teach you who does what at what phase of the process, who says what you don't say, what you show the patient, what you don't show the patient, how you're going to set yourself apart from everyone else selling that same service in your area. Basically give you all the tools you need from A to Z to get those cases closed. Now, as part of that, most practices do tend to alter their marketing as we teach a better sales process. So while it may all start with selling and case presentation, we eventually wind up in the marketing camp and fixing the practice's marketing too. I can tell you there's not a single practice that listens to your podcast that if they spend a single nickel on marketing, they won't get a huge return by just focusing on sales process without changing anything they're doing marketing-wise. But yet that's a discussion you just don't hear in the profession because sales is typically seen as a dirty word. And of course, by doing it correctly and ethically, we can wind up helping a lot more patients, which I would think is what this is really all about anyway.
I agree. My book, when I turned 50, I'm 50, I'll be 53 in 2 months. But when I turned 50, I had my granddaughter, Taylor. And my goal for myself was that, my dad and both grandfathers died at age 60, and I was 50. And I thought, God, by the time she opens up her own business, I might not even be here. And right. So I wanted to tell her everything I knew about business in one book. And it's exactly what you said. You only manage three things: people, time, and money. A business only has three functions: you make something, sell something, and watch numbers. And dentists don't want to sell anything, and they don't want to watch numbers. Look how big Jay Geyer's business got. I mean, he built a multi-million-dollar business because he realized that your advertising had to generate 4 calls to the front desk just for your front desk to convert one of them to an appointment.
Exactly.
And he's like, let's go in there and forget advertising more. Let's just go in there and get, Sherry up front to actually recognize it's a sales call and she needs to close the sale and get them scheduled.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
And
our latest latest rebuild on our case presentation course, we actually have an entire phone training session because you got to deal with that.
Yeah. Now, the first thing, I always try to predict questions that this dentist, she's driving to work. Most of my listeners tell me the same thing. The reason these podcasts have exploded is because the computer jumped into the cell phone, making it the smartphone in 2010. Then came the apps, etc. And she's driving to work, and most of these commutes are an hour, whether they're rural or urban, And she's driving to work, and she's saying, okay, here we go, another again. James McAnally, and he's down there in rich Miami Beach. So he's selling all these big cases because, and most people think of Miami as the retirement home for all the rich people out of New York and New Jersey. And she's sitting there thinking, hell, I'm in Edmonton, Oklahoma. And there's a reason Mr. Doctor left Oklahoma, went to Miami. So my first question is, can are there big cases anywhere? And then the other person saying, dude, I'm across the street from corporate dentistry. There's a corporate dentist office 2 blocks down from me that's open Monday through Saturday, 7 to 7, taking every type of PPO. So address those 2 concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, well, it would also be Edmonds, Oklahoma.
Oh, what did I say?
You said Edmonton.
Oh, Edmonton, that's Canada.
It is. The funny part is that our best performing clients are actually in these sort of secondary and tertiary markets, Howard. The competition is not as steep. Let's say compare Edmonds, Oklahoma to say Los Angeles, California. Where do you think the competition is going to be more keen?
Right.
Los Angeles. So actually in these markets, it's cheaper to reach the cases. That, you may not sell $100,000 cases, but you're going to sell a whole lot of 30s and 40s. And in many cases, there's even more need in these areas because of the background of the population, the education they had, the exposure to fluoride, those kinds of things. So in many ways, there are more big cases to be done in these areas. Our doctors in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kentucky, they clean up because they go to the market, they let the market know what's available in dentistry, and then they sell effectively. So, if you're in one of those tertiary markets, I say go for it because there's actually more opportunity there than there are in the big markets like New York and LA. So that's number one. Okay, so now the PPO market, right? So you've got to change.
And corporate dentistry. When your grandfather was around 100 years ago, there wasn't really corporate dentistry. Your dad probably saw some if he's, does he still practice, your father?
Oh, no, he's deceased.
He's deceased. So did he live long enough to see Orthodontic Centers of America make the New York Stock Exchange or any of those things? So what do you think about the birth of corporate dentistry in your career lifetime? You got out in 1993.
All since that then. Well, what's really happening is in order to sort of survive as an independent in this climate, you have to set yourself apart from everything else that's going on. You've got to either be better, you've got to be faster, or you've got to be cheaper. Or you've got to be some combination of those things, and those things will set you apart. You also have to have the public understand why you are different, and yet most dentists do absolutely zero work for creating any differentiation in their practice. They don't say I'm painless compared to others. Let's talk about that conversation. They don't say I'm faster than others. Let's talk about that conversation. So, all of these things are happening with the corporatization, yet the dentists sort of sit there and they don't do anything to set themselves apart from it. They just try to compete on price, which is impossible. The other side of it is that here's a marketing tip that is pretty advanced, but in this day and age with the internet, we can actually do online strategic research on what these companies are up to with their marketing. We can actually scan their websites, scan the ads they're running, and we can see what they're targeting with their own marketing. So we can actually leverage off of the money they spend to benefit our own practices. So, in some ways it's nice these entities are out there spending money because they're generating interest in the marketplace, and we have the ability to sort of tag along for the ride if we do this smartly. But I bet you I'm probably the first person to ever tell you that. But that does exist. And one of our expert internet marketers, that's what she does with our clients. She does spy work on the competition and then uses it against them.
Just for your office?
Well, no, for our clients.
Okay, your clients. Well, tell us about that. Tell us about that. How many? I want to make a comment you made. Talk about price. If you got to be cheaper than everybody. That if you're not going to be cheaper than everybody, you got to differentiate. And I just want to add. Technically, if you're just going to be the cheapest, it's a commodity. I mean, commodity by definition are things that trade on price, like gasoline, corn. Soybean. I mean, no one goes to a gas station to pay more for better gas than across the street. They just compete on price. So getting into a price war is always tough because the easiest way to lower your price is to give up your profit. You just lower your price. And if you're on the S&P 500 and you're a commodity, you probably only got a 5% profit margin. But if you can differentiate yourself, like look at even McDonald's. McDonald's, you go there because you want a Big Mac. You do not want a Whopper. Look at differentiate with Starbucks. When I was a little kid, all coffee was free at a gas station. I never saw anybody pay for coffee at a gas station. They had a coffee pot and a little styrofoam cup, and you just poured yourself some. But then Starbucks come out and said we're different. So you were saying What's the number one thing every dentist needs to keep on top of their mind about dentistry as a business?
Well, you just have kind of hit the nail on the head with the corporatization side of it. None of our practices create their own demand by just sitting there without telling the public that we exist. So you have to go out and announce your services in a very big and bold manner. You've got to sell what you do. Nothing that we do in dentistry will sell itself. So you have to focus on these things. Got to be marketing, got to be selling.
But first, though, you're not cheaper. You're better. So you first developed faster. So you first developed some amazing skills. You became a comprehensive dentist. Tell them the skills that you do.
Well, so comprehensive implant reconstruction, surgery, grafting, any of those things that a reconstructive patient would need. And in the days since I started, now it's about speed with those services. So if you're going to compete in certain markets now, you have to be the fastest, even with these services, because there's going to be another 12 practices that'll have the same price, but they're going to do it the old slow method. So you always have to be looking for what is it that's going to differentiate me from these others.
Which is what? Same day dentures, same day teeth?
Same day services, where you can literally have your implants done in a day. You can have your cosmetic remake done in a day. Now realize most patients won't qualify for the service because they don't have the right clinical conditions, or they may not want to pay for what that service costs, but yet you've been able to talk to the market differently than everyone else, and now you have more people are going to contact you because they're more interested in hearing about those services.
Now, didn't the first and largest implant company, Noble Biocare, which is started by Brandmark, who just passed away this year, don't they have centers in across the United States that are doing these all-on-4? Isn't that a Noble Biocare?
Yeah, it's originally their procedure that they basically taught to the profession. There have been other advancements since then. In particular, a guy here in Miami, Tony Sklar, has an advancement over their technique. And there are very few dentists that really do the procedure, and even fewer dentists who are actually willing to go to the market and market it effectively. Most dentists aren't willing to get on TV and talk about their services. They aren't willing to have comprehensive sales process. But when they will do this, they clean up. In fact, these Nobel affiliated centers, Clear Choice, they're not owned by Nobel, but there is a relationship there. They're not owned by Nobel? No, but they
do they only place Nobel implants?
They place Nobel products. I'm sure
there's a connection to them.
There is a connection,
and that's called Clear Choice.
Yeah.
So is that publicly traded, or who owns Clear Choice?
I believe Clear Choice is owned by a venture capital company.
Okay.
Yeah, but they they essentially market heavily, and they have a great sales process. Although mine's even better than theirs.
Well,
your listeners that are fearful of these corporate chains, we don't teach anything to corporate chains. I'm a believer in independent dentists, so we have these guys approach us from time to time, and we tell them we're not interested. So.
But it's interesting because there's 5,000 ophthalmologists, and 400 of them do all the laser surgery. 400 do like 99.9%. And so you're in ophthalmology, you just focus on 400 ophthalmologists if you're going to sell them LASIK laser or something like that. Because very few will invest in the laser. And then of those that invest in it, very few is going to go on television, radio, and billboard and just not like I'm in Phoenix, which has a metro of about 4 million, and everybody just thinks of Kleiner, Perkins, just this one huge center. And you go down there, and they're doing hundreds of them a day. Yet all the ophthalmologists that you go see in the neighborhood, they don't even have a laser. So is it kind of that way with this all-on-4 with general dentists?
Exactly. Usually in each state, there's going to be just 4 or 5 people, but in those practices, Howard, they are cleaning up. $5, $6, $7, $8 million with 2 practitioners is not unheard of with this procedure when it's being marketed well.
Okay, so what's the single most neglected thing in dental practices?
Well, hands down, I'm going to say sales process. Everything from the minor sales to things that are under $1,000. The patient would write out of their own pocket, to major sales, which is, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 and higher, that they're going to write checks for. And in reality, most practices do have some sort of minor sales process they use, but step into 100 practices and ask them, how are you going to sell something that costs $10,000, and they're going to just shake their head. So that's the biggest thing. And the reality is, if you're doing fee-for-service marketing. So you're a practice, you're trying to get fee-for-service cases outside the insurance system. If you fix your sales process, you're looking at a 25 to 50% more return on the cases coming out of that than if you have no sales process. So it's a big deal. Again, you don't read it in the trade magazines. It's not talked about at the ADA meeting. It's just simply not, it's not on the average practitioner's mind.
Well, speaking of marketing, I would love to market you if you ever decided to create us an online CE course or a series of, 3 course, whatever. We just put up our 317th course, and they've been viewed over 500,000 times.
Wow.
And it's and everybody, by the way, who's put up these courses, it's exploding their speaking career. I know a person who put up a 1-hour lecture and got 76 speaking gigs from here to Kathmandu to Australia because a lot of meeting programmers, like say they're told to go get a speaker in endo. So they go to Dental Town and there's 6 guys doing a 1-hour lecture each on endo, and that's kind of like a big debut. But I would love to have that. Specifically on that, do you yourself, you're a good-looking guy, you're in a suit and tie, you're clean cut. In your office, do you present the treatment? Do you go for the close? Or in a typical dental office, do you teach your clients from Kentucky to have a treatment plan coordinator do this?
Well, here's the thing, Howard. If you're asking a patient for an incredible amount of money, if the doctor can present the fee well, it's much better for the doctor to deliver the final fee and then let the staff handle the arrangements. But let's face it, if you really are an impediment to your own success in this reality of sales, then someone else in the practice has to be that person. So while I'm always going to stress that it's best that the doctor, he or she, does it himself, if they really suck at this, let's get them out of the way so that someone else can handle it. Because when you look at it from the viewpoint of if it's not handled well, the patient loses, then let's get it fixed no matter how we do that.
Now, some people have said things, and I was wondering, the worst thing in the world to do is generalize all humans. But one person told me that one of the reasons a doctor has to present the big cases is because this consultant believed that if you couldn't afford to buy the treatment, you'll never be able to sell it. You'll just, in the back of your head, you'll be thinking that's way too expensive. So if it's $100,000 case, you could afford it. Dr. McAnally could afford it, but maybe the dental assistant couldn't afford a $100,000 case, so she won't be effectively able to sell that. Do you agree with that statement or not?
Again, it's going to be mindset. It's not so much who could buy it, because I know plenty of top salespeople in real estate who they can't afford the multi-million-dollar houses they sell, but they sell them left and right. And the same goes in the dental office. I've had staff that were more than capable of selling $20, $30, $40, $50,000 cases, and they certainly could not have written that check themselves. Now, the catch is most dentists, they've hired people that aren't salespeople. They've hired people that have been around dentistry for too many years.
And they think that's a plus. The dentist always thinks that's a plus.
I think it's a plus, and it's a big negative for the most part.
Oh, yeah. She's got 20 years experience. Really? Where? Oh, you know that dentist who hung himself last year who was on 20 PPO plans? Yeah, she was there for 20 years. I'm getting a really experienced person.
Hire the clinical ones with a little bit of experience so they're not hard to train, but everyone else that's non-clinical, get them from somewhere else, and they can be sales stars for you. They'll be able to get credit cards over the phone to pay for diagnostic appointments, something unheard of from someone who's been in dentistry for too many years. They'll be able to sell cases and give the fees if needed. So, I don't buy that guy's recommendation.
Yeah. So what's the biggest thing holding most dentists back as it relates to niche procedures? Is it the training? Not going for the training? What is it?
It's mostly about getting too attached to how other people feel about them. Not maybe some of that's from patients, but a lot of it is how other dentists perceive you. Dentists are really fearful of what other dentists think about them. And one of the quotes that I like to personally even read for myself is something that a guy named Marcus Aurelius said, Roman emperor from almost 2,000 years ago. He said, "We think so highly of ourselves, but yet we're so concerned about what other people think about us, instead of just being concerned about with what our own opinions are of ourselves." So dentists get into this mindset of, "Oh my gosh, what will other dentists think?" And that's not what's important at all. Howard, there's also one other thing I wanted to follow up on the the neglected thing in the dental practices. When we talk about sales and all of the sales related things, I think the travesty here is that we've now got almost 50 years of real behavioral based science behind persuasion and influence. You have huge professors out of Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, you name it.
Hey, the guy who wrote Influence, he taught at my MBA program, Arizona State University.
Yeah, and Cialdini is actually he's also faculty at Stanford. You've got a lady named Ellen Langer at Yale. You've got Daniel Kahneman at Princeton, Sheena Iyengar at Columbia. You've got all of this data, and yet you mention these names to dentists, and they have no clue who any of them are, and yet their science would help so many more patients in our practice if we would pay attention to it. And that's all part of selling.
Right. He's Influence was an amazing book for me. He thought one of the most powerful words was because when you were a little kid and you only had a 10-word vocabulary, you learned real early on that, remember when we watched Peanuts when we were little, the cartoon Peanuts, and how did the parents always sound? Wah, 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 wah. And he realized that that's what parents sound like. And you always see that. You always see the young parent talking to a 1-year-old with a 15,000 word vocabulary. And you're like, do you not know this kid probably only knows 20 words? But they learn very early on that whenever dad says or mom says, because you're going to have to do it, because all the wah, 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 wah afterwards, they don't understand, but they end up, they have to do it. And that was a big takeaway for me, that book. What's the biggest mistake dentists make with technology?
Well, we're a gadget-oriented profession, Howard. You go to a dental trade show, and 90% of what we see there are new devices, right? And the reality is patients don't really care about any of these things unless it's going to make their life easier, faster, cheaper, better, less painful, any of the visits to the dentist, those kinds of things, they could care less. Most dentists buy these technology, they don't put them into terms that make any sense at all to the public in their marketing or in how they sell. In fact, I just got an email from a potential client this week where they'd invested $110,000 in a new cone beam CT scanner. These are these devices that take three-dimensional cone beam images of the maxilla and mandible, right?
Right.
And it's sitting there doing nothing because he's really not putting it into any kind of communication to the public where there's any benefit to them whatsoever. And so he's got this huge, lease payment, which could very well be his marketing budget, which I find kind of sad that that's what's happened. But that's really it. Unless we put these gadgets and tools and great things that they can actually do into terms that mean something to the patient, they just sort of don't do us any good. They don't do the public any good.
I don't like CBCT as a word because, number one, if you talk to a maxillofacial oral radiologist, they say that it's not even technically truly a CBCT. It started out that way, and now it's technically not even that anymore at a very technical level. I just like it going from 2D to 3D. When I got out of school, we had 2D images, and today we have 3D images. And but what is the message that you tell your public behind a 3D? I assume if you're an implantologist, would you call yourself an implantologist? Yeah. So I assume if you're an implantologist, how do you what's the message behind your 3D?
Well, what's happened is they know that these scans they know that there's a price tag associated with the scan. So in the marketing, it's simply come to whatever it is we're doing, and you're going to get this scan for free. And normally the price is X. So the scans have really become nothing more than a prospect generation tool.
In your office?
Yeah, and in all my clients' offices that have these too.
Yeah. So do you recommend they buy a CBCT or just have access to one?
It's going to depend on the practice. It's on a per practice basis. My biggest caveat there is if it's going to consume all of your marketing budget, then we need to be very careful with creating that expense in the practice, because if you're not marketing for cases, what are you going to do with this expensive device?
Yeah, and I always got to tell people, one of the biggest things you got to watch is what you're hardwired for, because a lot of success is massively counterintuitive. Like, you want to control everything, but business people delegate everything. Social animals are concerned what other people think because they're a social animal and they're only going to survive as the pack, so they're very concerned what everybody thinks. And being successful is not caring what everyone thinks and differentiating yourself and being different. And I always think the funniest thing is every time you let your dog out the front door, he goes and pees on all four corners of the territory because dogs mark their territory. They're very territorial. And I've seen so many dentists that were in with a partner. They were in as an associate and they didn't own anything. And they were making $300,000 a year, but they just had to own. So they left that and started up their own, and now they make $100,000 a year and are stressed out of their mind. So I'm just like, I'm sure glad you get to pee on all four corners of your office every morning, because so people are just territorial. What's the biggest misunderstanding in niche procedure marketing?
Well, one of the biggest is that you've got to invest. You will have to invest more to find your niche cases. Let's say you're really interested in fast ortho, right? These cases that you're going to complete the ortho in 6 months or less. There are these techniques now, and the public's interested in that. They want faster. Or let's say you're gonna look for patients that are interested in laser perio, which is all about saving your teeth without surgery, right? Well, you can't expect to spend the same money marketing for those cases as you would just your general practice, because you're going to have to go bigger and over a wider geographic area to find enough patients who can afford the dentistry you're going to be selling. So you're going to spend far more, and so dentists get trapped in this mindset of, well, I was only spending 1% a year marketing my insurance practice. Well, those patients were coming to you basically for free via the insurance, and you were also basically taking part of a marketing fee out of the case because the insurance company is taking 10 or 15% or 20% of the case. Also, with these niche cases, you have to realize you're going to have a lot less case acceptance than you do with your general practice patients, and therefore you've got to have a sales process to deal with that. If you sit around listening to people tell you no to the cases you're presenting all day, it's going to become very disheartening, and you're going to give up. So you have to have a sales process to get down to the patients who are most likely to say yes. That's one of the other biggest misunderstandings. I think the next one on the list would be that the sales process is going to be longer than what you're used to. Most dentists are used to presenting a couple of teeth the day they do the examination, and that's the case presentation there. And if it goes forward, it happens. If not, and the sales process took maybe 20 minutes. And yet, when you're talking about a $50,000 case, that sales process may be everything from a few weeks to 6 months to a year. And so we have to have something to manage that. As part of the sales training and process I developed, we actually have a 7-page checklist to get people from the first phone call all the way through when the check is written and they're into treatment. So there's a whole lot more that goes into this than they can imagine. Last but not least, I'll say too little focus, Howard. These practices, they want to do everything. They say, I want to be the biggest guy in implants. I want to be the biggest guy in ortho. I want to be the biggest guy or gal in perio, on and on and on. And each one of these niches that we have, each one of them requires its own marketing. And you've only got so much time, money, staff, and energy to market anything. So you get spread out over too many niches and you get less results, period. So, one of the best advices to, with this misunderstanding is just don't focus on too many niches. Pick one or two that you really care about and hone in on them.
And you picked implantology? Is that but? And you own your own practice and place all your implants, or do you have a partner or associate or?
At the time I was still practicing, Howard, I was placing everything, all the surgeries and everything.
But you're not practicing anymore?
No, this is full time now. This consulting business.
And how long has it been full time?
5 years.
Oh wow! Well, congratulations to that. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's how old you've gotten, Howard.
That's how old I've gotten. Wow. Yeah, I'm turning 53. And the first thing I noticed that went with me is I'll say to my boys, I got 4 boys, 20, 22, 24, 26. I'll say to my boys, remember 5 years ago when we blah, blah, blah? They're like, Dad, that was 10 years ago. And just this morning, I was telling Zach about something. He said, Dad, I'm pretty sure I wasn't born. And I'm like, oh my God.
To finish up on the misunderstanding too, Howard, one of the other things, especially with this abundance of associates that are available now, you can also build these niche procedures into a practice where you've got hired help doing the procedures. Because ultimately, the front end of it is marketing and selling. The back end is delivering of the service. So you can hire the help to do any of these things. So it's also important that the dentist doesn't get too concerned about, oh my God, I've got to be the one that's educated with all of this stuff. That's just not the case anymore.
Yeah, and I want to point out on the one of the biggest sections on Dental Town is obviously it's a digital magazine. Obviously, we're just coming up on 200,000 members who have posted 4 million times, so that's huge. But the classified ads get about 1,200 to 1,500 unique dentists per day because we have free classified ads, and they're just like has every feature that any Craigslist, Monster Jobs, anything like that has. But it was a surprise to me how a dentist will just say associate needed. And I'm just like,
it needs to be its own.
Two words, dude? Really, Doc? Two words. Wow. Wow.
About having a sales process, you can apply this to hiring your associates.
Yeah, I was thinking, it'd be a 50% better ad if you just put in a third word. How about a associate needed? You know what I mean? Or an associate needed. But yeah, I think the free classified Dental Town are totally underutilized. I think you should go into great description that says, hey, I'm a general dentist and this is what I do. And you know what I do not do? I don't do all these things. And these are my hours. And this building sits here 168 hours a week. I'd really love someone that could either come in and do these other products. But let's talk about dental insurance, because the way I look at what's the best advice you give regarding dental insurance? Because I look at dental insurance as nothing more than a volume discount. I mean, I have to go out and advertise on 1-800-Dentist or social media or direct mail or Yellow Pages or Billboard or any of those things to get an individual. But if I sign up for Delta, they'll just send me, a couple hundred patients. So those couple hundred patients on Delta, it's going to be a group discount, but there won't be any marketing costs. And I also think the most interesting thing about an individual patient versus insurance that blows my mind is a dentist won't blink signing up for a PPO that drops his fees 35% across the board. And then you go back and say, well, you don't blink at doing that. How about taking your marketing budget from 1% to 3.5%?
Ooh.
And they're like, no way, I'm not gonna do that. I'll say, okay, how about drop your fees a third? Right on. Where do I sign? Just show me the X. So what are your thoughts about dental insurance?
Well, probably one of the best discussions about a dental budget would be in volume 3 of the Dentist's Unfair Advantage.
Okay. Yeah. Raise that up again. And talk about that, because the truth of the matter is 85% of the people are just hearing this right now, but 15% see. But hold it back up again. When did that book come out? The Dentist's Unfair Advantage, Volume 3. Does that mean it's a 3-book series?
It is. And volumes 2 and 3 are in print. You can get them at Amazon or at our website. Volume 1 is getting into reprint. Still not available again yet.
Now, would you recommend that all 3 books be read, or is it more like the 3rd edition of one book? Is it like the 3rd edition of one book?
Completely different books.
They're completely different books. Well, you know how you could sell a gazillion of those books? Make an online CE course for each one of those books. I call it deconstructing the sales process. So there's 2 million dentists around the world. So if you're going from a guy 2 million dentists around the world, and Dental Town digitally, we mail the magazine to 125,000. That's got 200,000 members on the website, and they read it all around the world. But do an online CE course for book 1, book 2, book 3. And so they'll go from, okay, who is this guy? And then after they listen to you talk for an hour, then they're like, yeah, I want to, because it probably takes 6 hours to read a book. And I think that would explode your brand. Not just, you already got a hell of a reputation in the United States, but it'll really explode it in Canada, Australia, So
you're saying just do this, the 1 hour C course on the books.
Yeah.
That thing. All right.
Absolutely. That'd be an honor to have you do that.
Cool.
But in answer to your question, what's the best advice you can give regarding dental insurance?
Well, you've already touched on some important parts of this, and we could obviously spend a ton of time on insurance. And most dentists really they don't realize what they're spending on marketing by taking the discount, right? So that example you gave of 35%, in essence, that guy is now spending 35% of his production on marketing. It's just he's not writing a check for it. And that same guy could very well afford, if you didn't have that contract, to spend 8 to 10% on marketing going for fee-for-service patients. But you have that conversation with people, and they almost have a coronary, right? But I think it's important that we realize that insurance still has a huge role with generating a first step to get someone into the practice. Even if you're not on the contract, it's important to really embrace the insurance because, again, it is a tool that someone says, hey, you can file my insurance for me. Let me come in to listen to what you have to say about the dentistry. We provide our clients with some tools that actually, let's say a patient comes in who's on Delta and they've got a major case that needs to be done, and the dentist is hesitant to do it because he's going to take a discount on the whole case because of the Delta contract. Well, there are actually legal documents you can now use that use federal HIPAA guidelines to remove this patient out of Delta and into a different agreement with the practice so we can actually get the full fee. Again, something you're not hearing in the broader profession. But I think when we look at where insurance fits in sort of this trajectory of dentistry in modern times, we need to understand kind of where we are and where we've been. In those early days when my grandfather was practicing, this was all pre-fluoride, and they were just coming into like the main part of the Industrial Revolution in America, and so you had this huge part of the population with lots of need, not many dentists at all, and more wealth because of what was happening economically. So you had this boom in dentistry in the early part of the 20th century up until the fluoride age of the 1940s. And then we hit a period just post-World War II where suddenly you had all this economic growth and all these people coming into the workforce who now had also more disposable income, and we were getting better and faster in dentistry. We had another boom in the profession, and everyone did great. We get into the 1970s, and then what? We have an insurance boom. And so suddenly all of these patients are flooding the practices because they've got insurance, and we kind of got addicted to that model. And now we're sort of at an age where the profits are being squeezed out by the insurance companies, and we're getting in a bit of a bind. So we have to think about this a little differently than we did in the years past. And that as we look at it as a tool to get people in the practice, we only take the plans that don't beat us up too much. So a little bit of discounting is okay, but the massive discounting is not. And then we realize that we're going to spend a lot more percent of our annual gross on marketing than any dentist have ever spent in their practices up to this point. And we can because the cases are still worth it on the other side. The profit is there if we market for good cases. So, and it's been a very long answer, but you realize that there's a lot to the insurance answer more than just a pat answer.
I think that's interesting how you went into a historical perspective about your grandfather 100 years ago, no water fluoridation, and, times are different. It really ekes me when I hear these young suburban teachers and universities talk about Rockefeller and Carnegie as robber barons. It's like, dude, they were born in the Civil War. They saw the country completely destroy each other. They saw it as a personal religious mission, Rockefeller did, to rebuild America. And when he was rebuilding America and taking us from lighting candles to burning kerosene, I'm sorry he wasn't as polite as you would be born in a suburb today in America. And to call that guy a robber baron when he built America, same thing with Carnegie. They say his labor practices, they weren't prudent. Yeah, they weren't prudent compared to today. But man, when you're growing up and people from the state above you are coming down and burning down your entire city and almost 1 million people are killed, what is a labor practice if that's what you're born into? And it's funny, the guy who created the 5-hour workday, who was the first pro-labor guy, Henry Ford. Funny, wasn't it? He was born a year after the Civil War was over. You know what I mean? So he never even saw this type of carnage. But yeah, dental roots are huge. What people are born into. Like my 4 boys, their grandfather lived through the Depression. So when when he had $3 million in his savings account, he still couldn't go to a restaurant because he'd just stare at the menu and say, "A steak is $12. We could go to the store and buy it for $3. Why would we pay $12?" I mean, he still never got it to this day because he just never.
One of the last things about insurance too, Howard, is that even if you are an insurance-based practice, you need to have a sales process so that when a patient needs significant treatment, you can have the right tools to talk to them differently than your other patients, so that some of those patients will decide to go on to better treatment. We're doing our insurance patients a disservice if we don't have those conversations.
But when you said I'm a Delta provider, but Delta doesn't cover implants, so you could have any fee you wanted for an implant, right?
Well, and there's other, the thing is there's this battle among various states where you can't go, the contracted fee may apply to the whole case. So in some states you're sort of stuck, like let's say you're an insurance plan ABC, and they say that no matter what the final fee is for the case, like $20,000, your crown fee doctor can only be $1,000 a unit. When in reality, to do the case, you may need to charge $1,500 a unit. And yet, by the contract, you're sort of stuck. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's kind of weird how insurance company, it's a typical human deal where insurance was started to help a person get access to dentistry or medical, and then it turns into a control. Like, I'm going to help him, but now I have to control the provider. And that's a common thing with social animals, is they're always trying to be dominant over the other animals around them. So they're hardwired to control and dominate. And it's just crazy, some of those. But the way I look at a implant is, I tell people, look at a bottled water, and it's $1. Which is amazing that bottled water costs more than gasoline in the United States, and they still call Rockefeller a robber baron. But if it takes you 90 cents to build that bottle of water, then the little cap, that dime there, that 10%, that's the profit. And if you want to make another dime, the hardest way to do it is to make another unit of bottled water and then to sell it and collect the money. The easiest way to make another dime is just to raise your price 1 dime. Or 2 dimes. And what insurance has done to our physician friends, like look in Phoenix, Arizona, no physician can sell a practice because patients aren't worth anything. I mean, you can't sell a family MD medical practice because any idiot could open up a medical practice and be booked up 3 months in advance with Medicaid, Medicare, Obamacare. Patients are nothing because there's no money in it. You can sell a dental office, a veterinary office, a chiropractor office because those guys have margins of like maybe 35%. And but what I like about implants is the fact that when I got out of school, implants were $500 with Noble Biocare, and the prices just kept coming down and down and down, and the prices have just been going up and up and up. So if you're down to paying say $150 for an implant, $150, but you're charging $1,500 to place titanium, that's a lot of margin.
Yeah. And the reality is that not just with implants, but any of these services where we can speed up treatment, like I mentioned before, fast ortho or even a laser-based procedure where you're not removing any teeth or even putting implants in. The margin is incredible, and the patients want those services because what do? It's faster, better, cheaper, less pain.
So, are you talking about that? What is it called? I'm sorry, Propa. What's the fast ortho that technology? Propo. Propel.
There's like 5 or 6 technologies out there, Howard.
Can you name any of them?
One of them's like 6 month smiles.
Okay. So you meant that type. I thought you meant the technology, 6 month smiles. Yeah. I thought you meant there's some technologies that you can place on the bone.
There's a surgical procedure called Wilcodonics, which,
right.
It's sad that our oral surgeons and prosthodontists and orthodontists haven't really teamed up to market that like crazy because patients, they want fast treatment. And so it baffles me that our specialists haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, because there are some faster technologies. So what is the biggest fallacy you find in practices that struggle?
Most of them are going to say, I don't have enough time to do all of this stuff. And in reality, there's more than enough time. We're in an age where distraction is really the issue. People spend too much time on Facebook. They spend too much time at Dental Town. They need to realize where they invest their time. There's nothing wrong with going to Dental Town. It's great. Well, you need to say, I can't be there for 12 hours a day. I've got to do my business and I've got to do these other things, and I'll do this what makes sense. Facebook, I think, is a total waste of people's time. Maybe it's great for keeping up with your family a little bit, but people get sucked in and then they go, what happened all the time?
The best way to build your practice with Facebook is to delete your account.
Bingo. Yeah. There are some ways using reviews where we post reviews about the practice in Facebook, but that's really it. Everything else is a disaster. And I've been preaching that since the advent of Facebook. It's just not the right place for dentists. The other part is that, I love to work by the 80-20 rule, and most dentists never come to the conclusion that the science says that basically 80% of your results come from 20% of your work. And, that one thing, by focusing on the 80-20 rule in your practice, will make a huge difference.
And what would that be?
Well, like let's say even like in a procedure-based thing, let's go into the database and look at what procedures were done in the year, which ones were the most profitable, and then see how can we do more of those. Let's go into the patient base and let's see which patients were the most profitable. What do they look like as a group? And I guarantee you there's going to be some characteristics to it. If you're a specialist, if you do the same analysis, you're going to find that you've got a core group of 20% of referring doctors that send you all of your business. So why not focus on those guys and fire the rest? Because
you said dentists were into gadgets. You talked about, you can't do everything. You got to find a niche. You got to differentiate yourself. You can't be the biggest implantologist and the best orthodontist and the cosmetic dentist, et cetera.
Exactly.
We've seen 125,000 general dentists in the United States, and I'm thinking about 12,000 of them picked up a $100,000 CAD/CAM machine. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's about, what would you say, 10% market penetration? That's what I'm calling.
I would say 10%, and that's probably as high as they're going to get it, unless the price keeps dropping, which it will. The thing is, if you've got a busy practice where you're doing a lot of units, you can get away with having a machine in your office and not have to market it at all. But what happens is most practices are not doing enough units, and then they suddenly realize, I've got this expensive device and it's not being used as much as I would like, and they're not willing to go out and market it. In fact, one of my clients we actually wrote a book about CEREC just for his practice. So now he can go to the market and say, look, we're the only practice with a book about CEREC, so come see us for the service versus others. And so, that's the kind of thinking that's typically missing when people buy these CAD/CAM machines, is that how am I going to package that technology in a way that matters to the public? And let's face it, with CAD/CAM, it's about speed. It's like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to have the crown done in an hour and a half, I'm going to walk out and it's done. That's what the patient's interested in. And on top of that, if you can promise that you won't hurt them, you've hit the trifecta.
Yeah, but I see CAD/CAM can blow up on you too, because if I ask you, James McAnally, a lot of dental offices you walk into, and what they used to do is, first appointment was an hour and a half, and they would numb the tooth, prep it, take an impression, temporize, and you leave. Come back in 2 weeks for a 30-minute seat. And now a lot of those offices, that they do that in one appointment, but that appointment is 2.5 hours. And if I said to a guy like you, oh yeah, you see it all the time, and you see it with patient reviews. If I said to you, hey James, you want an hour today? Come back in 2 weeks for 30 minutes, or you want to sit in that chair for 2.5 hours right now and be done with it? And 90% say, dude, I can't sit in a chair for 2.5 hours.
If I was those guys taking 2.5 hours, they better get back to CEREC school.
Right, exactly. The masters, the masters could do it, but it's kind of like I see a CAD/CAM machine as like buying a grand piano. You just can't buy a grand piano and know how to play it. You're gonna have to practice and get good and get fast, and if you're not willing to do that. So what's the largest expense in a dental office is the dentist. The ADA says the average overhead in a dental office is 64%. That's 2/3. That means the dentist costs 1/3. The next biggest cost would be the staff, and we see staff, costing 25 to 30%. What's the biggest issue you see with staff, which is at 25 to 30%? Next largest cost maybe lab 8 to 10. Next would be supplies 4 to 6. I always think it's funny how dentists always are kind of concerned on their supply cost.
Right.
And I'm like, dude, your lab cost is twice as much, and your staff's twice as big as that, and you're bigger than that. So
right.
why are you worried about the price of gauze?
The gauze isn't going to kill you. It's the other stuff.
Because now the biggest deal with supplies is, did you see that Amazon, the 4th largest retailer in America, it's Walmart's number 1, Costco's number 2, Kroger is number 3. Most people haven't heard of Kroger because in each state their grocery store is different. Like in Arizona, it's Fry's, and Kansas, Dillon's. The number 4 is Amazon at $95 billion, and they just joined the Dental Manufacturers Trade Association, and they absolutely plan on selling you all your dental supplies someday.
And it's because they're fast. They've got the distribution.
Yeah, and with Amazon Prime, they can get it whatever you need in 2 days. And once again, everybody wants to talk about that, and I'm like, what are you going to talk about next? The light bill? I mean, what are we going to do? Just have a morning huddle around the thermostat every day, and have the women on menopause and the women in anorexia agree on what the joint temperature is, so we can decide who needs to shed clothes and who needs to put on a jacket. I mean, who cares? Labor's the big deal. So, what's the biggest issue you see with staff?
Well, first of all, especially if you're getting up to, how much did you say, Howard, for like what you're reading with the top end of staff costs?
Well, we everything I see is 25 to 30%. Now, a lot of dentists will say, "Well, my staff only costs me 22%." And I'll say, "Well, does that include FICA matching?" No. Does that include health insurance? No. Is that uniform? Is that so? When I say 25 to 30, that's everything it costs to have Yoni work in my dental office. You know what I mean? So, all the money that it costs, that's what I call labor.
Yeah.
And it's 25 to 30%.
Well, the biggest issues, you have with staff is oftentimes dentists keep the wrong staff on board because they're too afraid of hiring. They don't like hiring. One of the reasons we developed a hiring system to help our clients out, just because we know that they have a problem with hiring. The other one is, even if you got great staff that care a lot, we tend to not give them the right tools. Phone sales training would be a huge one. And in reality, that when you have staff answering the phone and you're spending a lot of money on marketing, that the phone training never goes away. It just can't, because you always have to be honing their skills in that area. So giving them the right tools, training them on the phone, and then rewarding them appropriately. There are excellent ways to actually have bonus systems that work well, if they're implemented correctly. And again, most of the bonus systems that you see out there don't work that well. And obviously, we don't have time to go into any specifics today, but there are ways to motivate the staff so they do an even better job for you in your practice. So those would be my biggies.
Well, back to I've only got you for 3 minutes. We've already cleared out 57 minutes. I want to get back to so 5 years ago you stopped doing big case dentistry, and you started big case marketing. Why did you stop doing dentistry and focus on this, and tell a dentist more about this and what it is you actually do?
Well, the transition, Howard, was over about a 5-year period. So I started this in 2005, and it continued to grow from day one up until where I did this full time in 2010. So essentially what I realized was my greatest and highest use of the profession was to work on what I'm working on and dispense it to the profession versus me just treating patients. There are far more patients around the world being treated now because of me in this business than I ever could have treated on my own in my one little practice. So that's really where I get my kicks out of dentistry now. As far as our services, we have the #1 case acceptance training for advanced dentists, which you can read about at bigcasemarketing.com. You'll find all the information there. And then we also have some do-it-yourself marketing products, or I will even take a personal interest in the doctor's practice and develop a custom marketing plan for any niche service they're interested in pursuing. But the reality is there's not a practice out there that couldn't benefit from our case acceptance training program, which is called the McAnally Selling System.
Now, is that a lecture? Does it start with a lecture or tapes or CD? How does it start?
It's all online, so anywhere it can be accessed as long as you have an internet connection. There are lectures. There are downloads with most of the sessions. There's materials for use in the practice that need to be customized.
So tell me what's on. If I go to Big Case Marketing, BIGCASE marketing.com, what are the entry level things? There's lectures that I can sign up for?
And people can take a $1 trial for 14 days in the training, Howard, and they'll get access to the introduction to the course and also session 1. At the website, they're also going to find a 25-minute video that goes into all the details about the training, about everything they're taught, all of the stuff they get as part of the training. At the end of the course, they wind up with having license to use the 7-page checklist in the practice to help them sell their largest cases. And then there's also plenty of other materials that are talked about on the 25-minute video they get at the end. But a big part about this is differentiation, Howard. And part of the training is literally getting them to do the work to finally decide what is it that makes my practice different from the others around me, and communicating that to the public. So in essence, we force them to improve their marketing and differentiation as part of the sales training course as well.
Well, I don't want to give you any marketing advice because you're the man on that, not me. But if I could give you any marketing advice, I would take the first 1 hour of those lecture programs or whatever, and put that up for free on the online CE on Dentaltown, because what we know in Dentaltown is I have 50 employees. So my business model is I'll split whatever you do. If you put it up for free, we'll sell it for free. If you charge $1, we'll take 50 cents because I got 50 mouths to feed. But I've noticed that if obviously a free online course gets the most views, every increment I think the average course is $18 an hour. Some of the biggest names out there charge like $400 for their courses on Dentaltown or whatever. But I think you should put 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours up, and then just close it and say, if you want the next 20 hours or 30 hours, go to bigcasemarketing.com. It'll be, like say, we got 200,000 members. So that would explode this.
Yeah, we put the intro and session 1 up for free, and then they want the rest of the course, you have to pay for the whole thing.
Yeah, I would do that. I think that'd be great.
We can always test it and take it off, right?
Yeah, and the internet, they call it the long tail because all of retail is based on scarcity. If you study business models of retail going back to New York City in the 1700s, I had a 200 square foot shop and you extinct me because the next generation put up a 400 square foot. And the next generation went 800 square foot. So now you have these 150,000 square foot Walmarts, Costco's, IKEA's. So because the bigger the box, the less scarcity there is, especially with supply chain management. Because when I was little, you could walk in a grocery store and the entire aisle might be just paper towels. Exactly. But now they're like, well, no, we'll just put enough paper towels that don't run out, and we'll refresh every day so we can have the maximum number of items. But the internet killed scarcity, because if you walked into the Barnes and Noble here in Ahwatukee where I live, they just closed it down. But that box was a big box, but it still only held 100,000 books. Yep. And Amazon Online holds 5.5 million books. Record shops are gone because they, on average, had 10,000 records, and iTunes has 7 million records. And you know what's amazing about iTunes? They've never put up a book or a song on iTunes or Amazon that didn't sell one copy a quarter. So it could be the strangest, rarest song found in a cave in Tibet, and somebody will buy that thing every 3 months. So Dentaltown has infinite tell. It doesn't cost us to put up your course. And I think what you're doing is extremely noble, because dentists think they compete against the dentist in the building. It just fries me to go in there to see all this camaraderie on Dentaltown. And I know, I'm smart enough to know, the only reason they love their fellow townies is because they all practice far, far away. And then they're in a building with 6 dentists, and I say, when's the last time you went to lunch with these 5 dentists? And most of the time, they've never gone to lunch with any of those 5 dentists. My best friend is a dentist right up the street, Tom Mattern, and we're buddies. And then there's other dentists on the same intersection that they haven't talked to anybody in Ahwatukee in their entire career. You know what I mean?
Underlooked marketing opportunities is for 4 or 5 dentists to jointly market. I mean,
yeah,
you get into
co-ops.
You get into Fort Smith, Arkansas, or Wichita, Kansas, and there are 4 of you marketing. Everyone will think you guys own the place.
Yeah, so I think what you're doing is noble, because what we compete against is trips to Disney World. We compete against Carnival Cruise Line. We compete against brand. I mean, look at my grandparents when I grew up in Kansas. I mean, they drove their cars till they had 250,000 miles on it, and every weekend was fixing it back together. Now every American, as soon as their car payment's up, 5 years paid for, traded in for a brand new $30,000 car with another 5-year program. These dental students, they walk out of school and they're all whining, I have $250,000 in student loans. Yet every single spring break, they were in Cabo or the Caribbean or on a cruise. And I'm like, you had more vacations in dental school than my parents had in their lifetime.
Right. And
you're whining to me. So humans, part with all their money and all the money they can borrow. They'll buy full mouth cosmetics, full mouth perio, full mouth ortho. But it takes you to get in their mindset, to teach them how to go in there and present this so that I tell my staff they're going to spend all their money and they're going to max their credit cards. My goal is they're going to max their credit card in my office, not at the mall.
Right.
But hey, we are completely out of time. We went 5 minutes overtime.
And Howard, who's the best contact for like doing the courses there?
So I'm Howard at dentaltown.com. But the guy in charge of the online CE, he's the Howard too, Howard Goldstein. So he goes by Hogo, Hogo at dentaltown.com. So if you want to email me, Howard at dentaltown.com, you want to put a course up on Dentaltown, it's Hogo at dentaltown.com. And seriously, James McAnally, my Irish buddy, by the way, I'm 100% Irish at 2 parents, 4 grandparents, and 8 grandparents. So I'm not even going to ask you if you're 100% because anybody whose name starts with a Mick has got to be a Jameson drinking Irishman. And so thank you for all that you do for dentistry, and I hope more people hear your message.
Awesome.
Have a great day.